Welcome everyone to episode 9 of season 5 of the Northern Spin podcast. My name is Michael Taylor, described recently as veteran business journalist. How do you think that made me feel?
Pretty old, I get that as well.
By some media whippersnapper. Anyway, I edit thebusinessdesk.com here in the Northwest. As always, I'm joined on the Northern Spin podcast by Chris Maguire. How would you describe yourself?
I would describe myself probably as a icon. No, I would describe myself like you as a veteran business journalist, but somebody who wants to try and do the right thing. And for that very reason, before we do the normal introductions, Michael, I want to get something off my chest. I describe myself as a lowercase c.
That's what I was asking you. There was the prompt. The open goal for you.
The open goal, which hopefully I'm going to score. Yeah, I would describe myself as a lower C conservative. I'm not ashamed. I think that is a true description of me. However, has there ever been a crueler, nastier, more pernicious, vindictive Home Secretary than Suella Braverman? Now, we all know she's making a clear pitch to be the next leader of the Conservative Party after the Conservatives lose the next general election. We know she pays lip service to the ministerial code. Her solution to the problem of boat crossings is to send people to Rwanda, which is clearly wrong. Her solution to the Israel-Hamas conflict is to describe pro-Palestinian marches as hate marches. And now she's going to go to war on homelessness by saying that homelessness is a lifestyle choice, and she's going to tackle the problem of tents on our streets. Suella Braverman doesn't come up with solutions, only red meat rhetoric to appease the right wing of the party. It's absolutely shameful.
Well, thanks for saying all of that, Chris. I could make light of that. I could use it as a opportunity for a bit of banter between us from left to right, but I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go there because I totally agree with what you say. And I'd extend that charge of pettiness and dangerous posturing, not only right across the Tory party in this country, but across many other Conservative parties and right of centre parties around the Western world. You know, we saw it with Trump. We saw where that ended up with that culture war rhetoric that ends up with thousands of people storming the Capitol building and people losing their lives. I think it's a really, really dangerous time. And you're right. I'm glad you're taking a stance against that. And good luck to you in tidying up the Conservative Party. How's everything else in your life?
All good. We had some great feedback last week about the podcast from Simon Kite, who's always been a man of impeccable taste. He works at Safri. I promised to give him a shout out. So hello, Simon. I also come bearing a very, very early Christmas present.
Okay, but we're recording this on November the 6th. I've still got the smell of gunpowder in my hair. What hair I've got left from firework night like last night. What was it like in Chorley? Because in Marple, it was like, well, I'm not going to say what it was like because it's distasteful, but my actual comment, Rachel's comment was, oh, just grow up.
You know what I couldn't understand? It went on for about a week, but we were driving back from Liverpool yesterday and there were fireworks going off during the day. And I thought, what's the point of a firework going off during the day? We are wearing our poppies with pride. Obviously, it's the week. But I come bearing an early Christmas present. As you know, next week's episode will be the final episode of season 5 of Northern Spin, and we weren't due back with a new look season 6 until 2024.
Sounds a long way off when you say it like that.
I know it does, yeah.
Anyway, what we're going to be doing in the new year and what we're going to be doing before Christmas is a preview of the year ahead and also a review of the year that we've had, because it'll be our first full year as the Northern Spin podcast. We'll be featuring some of the interviews that we've done over the course of the year and also some of the insights and predictions, things we got right and things we got wrong.
I think it's a nice thing to reflect back on the year as well for us, as well as our listeners as well. So that's our gift to you, but we've got more gifts today.
No, we have indeed. So we've got a few things to talk about this week. Given the Elon Musk, Rishi Sunak loving at the Global AI Safety Summit at Bletchley Park, we're going to be providing some insights into the increasingly complex relationship between politics and business and the role of lobbyists and why is it that politicians make such a play for the business vote when actually it's quite small, isn't it?
But it's significant. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. The Israel-Hamas conflict, you know what? It was only a month since that horrendous terrorist attack by Hamas that killed 1,400 Jews. That was October the 7th. It's absolutely dominated.
And Arabs.
It's absolutely dominated the headlines ever since. However, the conflict has really stepped up in the north with 2 council leaders in the region calling for Keir Starmer to resign over his policy, and a Labour MP in the north having the whip removed from him. I think Starmer's facing a serious test, and we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, we're also going to be talking about some of the shameful disclosures at the Covid Enquiry. We know that Boris Johnson was incompetent. I think none of it's come as any great revelation that he was utterly, utterly unfit to lead this country at a time of crisis like that. But even I was shocked at the nature of some of the revelations and the way in which people in government conducted themselves. But before all of that, a few thank yous, starting with our award-winning producers, What Media, who produce this podcast every week. They recently won the Best Travel Tech Provider at the Global Youth Travel Awards in Lisbon. Congratulations.
Absolutely. Well done to them. I'd like to thank our headline sponsors, FI Real Estate Management. FI Real Estate Management, headquartered in Chorley. They have a network of properties across the UK which tenants can tap into. They can cater for everyone from a one-man band working from home and needing space to enterprise customers wanting a whole building. They don't just work in one sector. They work across the office, commercial and industrial markets as well. FI Real Estate Management has been going for 40 years now. They pride themselves on growing with their customers on their journey. If you do need any space, contact FI. And the name in the frame is Matthew Pickles.
Oh, that was good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. Yeah, thank you to FI Real Estate Management. Right, we are the Northern Spin Podcast. And after last week's deep dive into the BBC, I thought we should look into the relationship between business and politics, given that we're both business journalists.
You're a veteran business journalist.
I'm a veteran, indeed, yeah.
Yeah.
I think on the whole, it's a necessary part of public life. We do live in a market economy. It's important that that businesses are not only regulated, but also, that there's a strategy that gives them some indication about what activities they can do that can contribute to the public good. That's the job of politicians after all. But I thought we could also offer some insights and some examples, and also to flag up where it can be quite grubby from time to time. Well, let's start with something current. You must have been absolutely delighted at the love-in between Elon Musk and Rishi Sunak. A couple of tech bros in their gilets and their Patagonia sweatshirts.
It's interesting because it's like, the Conservatives will complain about pretty much everything. And a number of Conservatives are unhappy at that budding bromance between Rishi Sunak and Elon Musk. We have a section in the podcast called On Manoeuvres, and I would definitely put Sunak in that because his appearance at the AI conference was like a job interview for a big tech job in Silicon Valley, which he clearly wants after his reign as Prime Minister comes to an end. I think Sunak looks so much more comfortable and natural and happy when he is with his tech bros rather than at the dispatch box in the House of Commons. I should set the scene. There's nothing wrong with businesses and politicians having a good relationship. I think that's really important. You went to Labour's party conference in Liverpool and that was a wash, wasn't it?
Yeah.
With businesses.
Blue suits abound, I think was my headline.
Yeah, but that wasn't always the case, was it, in terms of the Labour conference?
No, definitely. No, I think the most prominent sartorial thing at Labour conference in about 2018 was probably a Palestinian flag wrapped round you. How times have changed.
How times have changed. And I'm glad about that. Last week, I interviewed Matt Scullion, who's the chief exec of a Manchester-based tech firm called Matillion. It's a unicorn. It's got a valuation of $1 billion US. He was telling me that he regularly gets invited to Downing Street to discuss the tech sector. He actually said he finds it quite sad because he said, in the bigger scheme of things, he said, we are one of the biggest players in the tech sector in the UK. But if you compare us to the US, we're so much smaller. And he wants to see that net spread even further. Next week, we've got Lou Caldwell, OBE, who is the chair of Greater Manchester Business Board. So she'll be our special guest. So we'll talk to her about the relationship between, business and politics as well. The problem for me is when that relationship between business and politics is muddied and there's no transparency.
Okay, so obviously we both cover the business world in the North. We both put on events where politicians are speakers. I've also worked in the education sector in a role where I liaise regularly with politicians to try and influence them and to know good examples of good practice in the university sector, particularly how it liaises with business, which is important to them. And I used to train academics in how to have an impact on policy, something that they're actually measured on. Now, last week, thebusinessdesk.com held a conference in Leeds called The Business of Yorkshire. Star billing was given to two Yorkshire politicians, the mayors, Tracy Braben in West Yorkshire and Oliver Coppard in South Yorkshire. Now, the South Yorkshire Metro Mayor said at the conference, the fact that both of us are sharing a platform today is a sign of our shared commitment to making Yorkshire the best place in the whole country to start up, scale up and invest. I mean, that's a really direct plea to business to work, And there aren't many votes in that, are there? Similarly, Tracy Braben, she said, it's impossible for policymakers sat in Whitehall and Westminster to get this right because they're too distant And she had a vision for a brighter Yorkshire that works for all and successful businesses to be at the heart of that vision. Also in the north last week was Keir Starmer, who was in the northeast speaking to their Chamber of Commerce, saying he would bring forward a modern industrial strategy to work hand in glove with the private sector, invest in the potential of regions like this, and win the race for the jobs of the future. The job of the government, as I see it, is to set a strategy. And he pointed out that the government's industrial strategy, if you go to the department's website and look for it, you find the industrial strategy. It's got a stamp across the top of it that says archived. So do you think business? Do you think they should have an industrial strategy, or do you just think they should let business get on with it? Because that's the danger.
No, you want to provide a framework in which business can operate, and you actually want, business-friendly legislation. At the moment, we're paying a huge level of tax. Corporation tax has just increased as well. I mean, it's not an easy place to run a business right now. One thing I do want to ask you actually is, given your insight, is how do you think Oliver Coppard and Tracy Braverman, come across in terms of their cut through? Because so much stuff, and we talk about it, we're guilty of it as well by talking about Andy Burnham. I mean, Oliver Coppard hasn't got the wheels, the machinery behind him that Andy Burnham has. Tracy Braverman has got more than Oliver Coppard. How did they come across?
They come across well. I mean, they're very capable politicians. I think the difference is that they don't have the same levers to pull that Andy Burnham has. He's creating a new transport system. He's got power over the skills system. He's done some very high visible he's taken on some really high visibility issues like tackling street homelessness. You could argue at the moment not that successfully because of things that are actually out of his control. I think he's a far better retail politician than they are. He has a higher platform. I think he's a better communicator. But they're making a decent stab at it. I mean, they both performed very well at our conference last week.
Yeah, no, and also Andy Street performs really well down in the West Midlands as well. But if you're talking about Metro mayors who are really getting some cut through, you would say Andy Street and Andy Burnham as well. But no, I just wanted to get that insight off you.
Yeah, not at all. No, thank you. I've read a piece actually on the way here today about from Jeremy Warner in the Daily Telegraph, saying that business has got its eye off the ball. And it seemed very consistent with something that Kemi Badenoch said, which is saying that businesses, they should be focused on profit, that that their obsession with ESG, which is environmental, societal and governance goals, was getting in the way of them achieving profitability, taking their eye off the ball. I just wondered what you think, because you must write about businesses in the tech sector all the time that are really committed to the ESG agenda. Do you think that is undermining it? Do you think their commitment to that makes them part of the anti-growth coalition that Liz Truss has identified?
Yes, the anti-growth coalition. One of the things that's quite interesting is how you're perceived. And we do a lot of work with private equity. We do a lot of stories about companies that have invested in private equity. And one of the things they have at the top of the list of their priorities is ESG. So can their investee companies demonstrate that they're taking the environment seriously? But a lot of their suppliers and a lot of their customers. I went to and I digress very briefly because I'm mindful of the time.
Not so.
I went to a play at the weekend on Friday, and I'm not a cultural animal, but this was a play put on by students, and the premise behind it is that these students are in a classroom. They're 16 years of age, okay, and a load of defendants come forward, and they're people like me and you right now who have to defend their approach to climate change and what we've done to save the environment. And if we don't think they've done enough, then they die. It's as graphic as that. And actually, I thought to myself, if I was to stand in front of my children 10 years from now and explain what I've done about the environment, I would be found guilty. I think in terms of companies, I think there is they call it greenwashing, don't they?
Yeah.
But are they committed to it? Yeah, I'm not so sure.
Well, we used to be quite skeptical about it. About 15 years ago, I was genuinely quite skeptical about a lot of the way that business conducted itself and the way it embraced things like corporate social responsibility. And I actually called it the icing on the turd.
Yeah.
Because quite often there were businesses who have no right to burnish their green or environmental or societal credentials because actually they were just using it to give themselves a good public face. Anyway, it is an interesting strategy from the left of politics to be cozying up to business. I've given you 3 examples there of the 2 mayors. I think Andy Burnham does it as well, just as well. Keir Starmer's made a massive play to have an industrial strategy to cozy up to business. It's not always been the view, though, has it? And I don't see a massive clamouring, apart from in the Daily Telegraph, possibly, definitely not in the FT, of businesses to adapt a more laissez-faire free market approach and to let businesses do what they want, whenever they want, even though we're going to hear from Rishi Sunak this week that he's probably going to allow more drilling in the North Sea for oil.
One of the reasons I describe myself as a small case C conservative is that I've never felt Labour have been business friendly. I think you would argue that under Tony Blair it was slightly different. I think more recently Jeremy Corbyn and Ed Miliband didn't have a very good relationship with business. I think part of that is the Labour psyche that wealth creation is wrong. I don't think wealth creation is wrong, providing it's distributed the right way. I think Starmer recognises this, and in the last 2 or 3 years he's been working behind the scenes with Rachel Reeves, his Chancellor, his Shadow Chancellor, your mate Johnny Reynolds. They've held regular roundtables. You've been involved in some with business leaders. So I do think there's a lot of soft touch politics going on with business. And ultimately, if you look at our economy and you look at our problems with productivity, if we're going to drive that forward, it's going to be on the back of business being more productive. So why would you alienate that share of the vote?
I remember a lot of the rhetoric around the Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter when Andy Burnham was trying to sell it both to businesses and to trade unions. And the wording, it was very carefully chosen around that. It was to be pro-business, inevitably, but also to say it's in their interest to have a stable, well-paid workforce to increase the level of money in the economy. It's a tough ask, to ask business to pay higher wages, but we see what happens when businesses don't pay good wages and what their reputation does. I've led our news service this week on a story around the BBC's treatment of a Manchester business, Boohoo.com, who have been accused once again of really putting the screw on their suppliers and the implications of that. It's interesting. I'm going to tell you a quick story about Johnny Reynolds. He wrote a really interesting blog post in the aftermath of Labour's election defeat in 2015, saying that, frankly, a lot of people in the Labour Party would prefer it if everybody just worked for the NHS. Yeah. As a way of describing their kind of discomfort with the private sector. And my own academic research about how Andy Burnham's mayoral authority established itself and built networks a lot of it was around the engagement with the business community. You'll have experienced yourself his connections and relationships and the effort he's put in to wooing the business community and around his different pillars and different strategies, including tech and digital, which is massively important to him.
Well, because he recognises the value of collaboration, and that's something Manchester's done for a really good, for a long time. Tim Heatley is a good example. He's the founder of a property company called Capital and Centric. He featured on his own TV programme. He's a great guy, actually. He's the chair of Greater Manchester Mayor's charity. Now, by leveraging his contacts, he's helped raise millions of pounds to tackle the problem of homelessness. You mentioned homelessness and the difficult job that it is to try and the problem to try and fix. There's a situation going to come up fairly soon in Greater Manchester where thousands of asylum seekers are going to get their applications decided in the next weeks or months. If they, and that, depending on the outcome of that, is going to create a huge new demand for homes in Greater Manchester. That in itself could create more homelessness. And then you've got Suella Braverman coming out with this outrageous statement.
Yeah.
The problem, as always, is there's no transparency. And there's a couple of examples which I would highlight, and you mentioned before actually, where it creates this impression that businesses have got their snouts in the trough. In my opinion, most businesses haven't got their snouts in the trough, but the worst offenders are making it really bad for everyone else.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to grace and favours, doesn't it? Who sits on different boards and what do they get out of it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Where are the conflicts of interest and how are they managed? If a business cozies up to a politician, be they in central government, regional government, cities, if they donate to parties, I think that businesses are very, very sensitive about doing that and very mindful about how that can come across. It looks like they're getting special treatment. Look at all the stuff around the Covid Enquiry that's going to be coming out around PPI. Is it PPE?
Yeah.
PPI is something completely different.
Yeah.
And when businesses want something in return for their close relationship with politicians, that's when it starts to get really murky. And you've got some good examples of that, haven't you?
Well, I mean, you can look at the whole situation with David Cameron and the way he's been lobbying as well. But the one that I would have going to mention is Teesside Mayor Ben Blocker-Houchin, who, for those new listeners to the podcast, has blocked us on social media. His Teesside's Works project, which is something that, the Tees Work project, which is something that he's placed great weight on, been heavily investigated by Private Eye. It centres really on the role...
Financial Times.
And the Financial Times, Jen Williams, yeah. It centres really on the role of private developers and the fact that they've taken more money out than they've put in, a lot more. Houghton's always denied any wrongdoing, as have the developers, but I think it highlights what can happen when there's no transparency. And the other one that you've just sort of touched upon it, Michelle Mone, she received £29 million from the VIP Lane PPE firm during COVID as well. And we haven't got any answer to that. And she's a peer.
Yeah. So do you think at the moment then that Labour are dangling favours in front of business, or do you think that they're getting the message of partnership right? Or do you think it's got the risk that it could look quite sleazy? What's your gut telling you?
No, my gut's telling me that if they're going to be taken seriously as a party of government, they have to have a good relationship with the business community. Yeah. Now, that's not the same as what Boris Johnson did, where he, he sort of cozied on up to Russia and stuff like that, and he, cozied on up to rich entrepreneurs. That's horrendous, and the whole situation with the VIP lane during COVID. But I do think that Labour is trying to set itself apart as a party of integrity. Something that Rishi Sunak spoke about. And if they don't do that, and if they're seen to be doing deals in grubby, corners of corridors, they'll come unstuck. But that's speculation on our part.
Yeah, I think there were plenty of examples in the new Labour years of business cozying up to Labour and wanting special favours in return. Remember the Bernie Ecclestone scandal back in 1998 around cigarette advertising for Formula One. Yeah, there were plenty of examples, weren't there? And property developers.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think watch this space with interest. I think it's fair to say Sir Keir Starmer's got quite a few other problems on his
that's right. I know you want to talk about the growing pressure on Sir Keir Starmer over his handling of the Israel-Hamas conflict.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that he was in Sunderland last week. He was at a soft drinks manufacturer. He's pictured in front of the words, clearly drinks, which is one of those things where his special advisor needs to say, Keir, don't stand in front of that picture, otherwise it'll look really bad. It's like a football manager when he goes out the exit door. The press are like geared, the photographers want that picture.
Yeah.
He must feel like a drink at the moment.
He must, yeah. But anyway, Starmer's speech to the North East Chamber of Commerce can be summed up like this. The Tories have let the North down over 13 years. Labour won't. But as ever, that message was drowned out by reverberations from the Middle East. Just give us a quick recap on what happened and what new developments have happened overnight.
Yeah, I think probably 4 or 5 things. Burnley Council leader Afrasiab Anwar and Asjad Mahmood, who is the leader of Pendle Borough Council, have called on Sir Keir Starmer to resign as party leader for refusing to back a Gaza ceasefire. Middlesbrough MP Andy MacDonald, who's an ally of Jeremy Corbyn, he had the party whip removed for him for his River to the Sea speech, which is hugely provocative at the pro-Palestine rally, or a pro-Palestine rally. MacDonald is now threatening to sue Chris Clarkson, who's a Tory MP for Hayward and Middleton, who's gone really, really quiet for ages. Now suddenly he's piped up. He claims that MacDonald had sought to, quote, justify the murderous actions of Hamas, something MacDonald said clearly wasn't the case. There was a poll by a company called Savanta UK. I think it's interesting because it said it polled 618 Labour councillors and found that 43% are dissatisfied over the leadership's position on Israel and Palestine. And I think Starmer, in recognition of that, did try to set out Labour's position and resisted calls for a ceasefire, saying it would embolden Hamas and effectively just freeze the status quo as where we are rather than come up with a long-term solution. I think it puts a lot of pressure on Starmer, and there's no question, I think, well, in my view, I think it weakens his position in the north, but I think he's in an unwinnable position here, isn't he?
No, I think he's walking a tightrope. I don't think it's unwinnable or unsalvageable. I think the calls for him to resign are overblown. As I understand it, one of those council leaders, in fact, several councillors in Burnley have actually left the Labour Party. I think it shows what's happening on the street, really, with particularly with the Muslim community in certain communities across the north. So I was out in Manchester on Saturday, and there was a huge presence of a pro-Palestinian demonstrators right on the streets, not just in a rally outside the library that I saw at about 1 o'clock, all around the centre, all afternoon, occupying Piccadilly Station at 4 p.m. They're marching around, singing, waving flags. It was peaceful. It's easy for me to say I wasn't intimidated because I'm a skinhead in my 50s, you know. I don't know how it would feel if you're a Jewish family out shopping on Saturday, and I'm sure that if there were any instances of intimidation, we'd have heard about it. But it is a real show of strength from the Muslim community about an issue that is really, really important to them. And as I said, Keir Starmer is walking a tightrope on this. I think the spectre that haunts the Labour Party over any issue with the Muslim community is the spectre of George Galloway and his Respect Party, or whatever vehicle he chooses to create, and potentially, you know, an electoral threat in up to a dozen seats around the country. Here's the thing, though, Chris. What difference and what notice will any British politician calling for a ceasefire have on the Israeli military at the moment? I'll tell you, zero. It'll make less than zero impact, whatever an opposition politician in this country said. It's purely performative. I can't believe people are overblowing the importance of Labour's position on this one, or even the British government's.
No, I agree.
Sunak's stance
I agree.
on it.
No, even if Rishi Sunak said we demand a ceasefire, it really wouldn't change the mind of Netanyahu.
No. And just to finish on this one, I think there will be also core swing voters who don't like to see demonstrators on the TV, particularly as we're building up to Remembrance Sunday this week. There has been talk on the news that, you know, there'll be we can't have a cenotaph procession this year because we're letting the Palestinians have their march. I mean, it's not true, but that is spreading like wildfire around mainstream Britain, the Daily Mail, all that sort of thing. And those people who are the sort of people who Keir Starmer absolutely needs on side to win the election, he needs them to not be spooked by these demonstrators and to think that he's a weather vane, that he's switched over to them.
It's just, this isn't just about Labour, because, I mean, the Conservatives...
So tell us about the impact on the Tories as well.
Rishi Sunak sacked Paul Bristow as the MP for Peterborough. He's a parliamentary private secretary. He wrote a letter calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Now, it's worth making a point that Bristow was part of the 2019 intake, so his constituency has got twice as many Muslim voters as the national average as well. So you could argue, I'm not saying this is the case, that clearly his sacking suits Rishi Sunak, and it probably suits Paul Bristow as well. We're going to talk about COVID, aren't we? Yeah,
we are. So tell us about the COVID inquiry and who was giving evidence last week, and what did you think as a Conservative supporter?
Lowercase C Conservative supporter.
I was. What did you think of it?
I don't want to sound like a 51-year-old guy who just says I was sickened, I was appalled, it was shameful. I think
appalled,
I was all of the above, and I just want to. I want to rise above that as well. On the eve of Dominic Cummings' expletive-laden evidence, the families of COVID victims, they went up to Barnard Castle, where famously Dominic Cummings went for his drive to test his eyesight, and they projected this image, which was 231,332 COVID deaths. Is that clear enough to read on the walls of Barnard Castle? That's in reference to all the people that died during COVID as well. Let's not forget the 231,332 people lost their lives to COVID, including, my uncle. So I think we all knew that Cummings swears a lot. I mean, the fact he was appointed into the position that he was by Boris Johnson is a sad indictment of his judgment in people. I think once again it highlighted that we had an incompetent Prime Minister in Boris Johnson. But there was a really interesting point. Helen McNamara, the former Deputy Cabinet Secretary, was one of those on the end of one of Cummings's four-letter, insults. And the impression that I get is that there was this highly testosterone-charged machine at 10 Downing Street, which basically attempted to shut women up. And I think the UK's and the number of women who actually stood at the daily press conference as well was negligible.
Yeah,
and is it any wonder that the UK's COVID response was so poor if we shut out such a huge swathe of public opinion?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of more things to come out of this. One is I was as appalled as you were. I think we always knew that there was a horrific rabble of self-centered narcissists at the heart of government. That's nothing new. But here's the thing, Chris. Rishi Sunak supported them. He was at the absolute heart of the government, this government of gimmickry. More is going to come out about him in particular. Boris Johnson at times saying, let the bodies pile high, his personal obsession with brand, the eat out to help out the virus thing that he did in that August as we were coming out of lockdowns. But anyway, more to come on all of that. But let's go to a quick break and hear all about our sponsor, Assets Capital. Assets Capital is a leading Manchester-based independent specialist lender who, for the last 10 years, have supported UK SME, house builders, property investors and business owners to achieve their ambitions. Having lent over 1.7 billion to date, and with ambitious growth plans, Assets are well on their way to breaking through the 2 billion of lending as they embark on the next phase of their journey. They have a dedicated team of property professionals and lending specialists who pride themselves on getting to know their customers and being with them on every step of the journey. If you need a straightforward, no-nonsense lending partner with a proven track record, contact Andrew Charnley and the team at Assets Capital. Big enough to matter, small enough to care. Welcome back to part 2 of Northern Spin and our regular features, Anything to See Here and On Manoeuvres. Right, Chris, where do we want to go first?
Well, one of the things we want to do with Northern Spin is highlight stories in the North that would otherwise be missed. And we've spoken about COVID, we've spoken about Israel, we've spoken about and Palestine. But last week, the Tories did a huge screeching U-turn. Can we have a screeching U-turn sound effect, please, to our friends at What Media, on plans that would have closed the vast majority of railway station ticket offices in the north of England in a cost-cutting measure. It's something, actually, that Andy Burnham railed against when, pardon the pun, when we spoke to him. The plans would have left just 27 ticket offices in the north of England. Anything to see here, Michael?
Yeah, I can't believe the Tories even attempted this. In September, Sunak said closing ticket offices was the right thing for the British public and British taxpayers. Yeah. And only 1 in tickets are currently sold at ticket offices. I mean, I gave the big thumbs up to our ticket office this morning on my way in, even though I'd already bought it on the app. But it's not the point. It's not always just about me. It's about other people who don't necessarily have smartphones and can use it. And they can get some support around the railway station as well. Transport Secretary Mark Harper had the absolute brass neck to say that he's told the rail industry to rethink their proposals. And they're absolutely fuming, apparently, that they were effectively told to do this by the Ministry of Transport, put some plans in place, and then the government realised the politics of it are bad and do a reverse ferret on it. It's also handed an advantage to the people's champion, Mick Lynch. I mean, what an absolute turn that is, that suddenly we've got a union leader who looks like he's on the side of the public.
My wife went to the railway station in Buckshaw Village, which is near Chorley, and they've got a machine there, and they've always had a ticket office. Now, that ticket office, for whatever reason, was closed, and there was a queue of people 10 deep trying to use the ticket machine, and that's just one very small example. I know you like a much bigger pool of people before you constitute an opinion.
Crisis on the railways. I'm going to give you family.
It says no. I'm going to give you another name, actually. Scott Patient. Now, Scott Patient is a councillor with Calderdale Council out towards West Yorkshire. He's hit out after being excluded from Labour's long list for the Calder Valley seat in West Yorkshire. He took to Twitter, now known as X, to vent his frustration and deep sadness, signing off, which I thought was quite amusing, yours in solidarity.
Oh, did he get his fist up?
Anything to see here?
Well, yeah, we've talked about this so many times. The process to select Labour candidates in the next general election has shown how ruthless Keir Starmer and his core team in Labour in Millbank in their head office can be. He's not leaving anything to chance, and there's no let-up in the rigour that they're applying to scrutinise candidates to get their people in place and to make sure that the shortlist that local members choose are between candidates that they're happy with. Here's the thing, though, Chris, and I know I keep saying that. Yeah. I'll try another way to segue. Okay. If Labour have a small majority at the next general election, the importance of the awkward left, people like Zara Sultana, John McDonnell, or whoever succeeds Diane Abbott, people on the left in politics, Richard Bergen, the size of their importance and the compromises Starmer will have to do to get their support for Labour's programme of government is going to be crucial. The bigger the majority that they've got, it lessens their impact.
No, and you're exactly right. Yeah, and he's talking about 10 years of a minimum 10 years of being in charge. The Labour Party have similarly intervened in a number of candidate selections in Wakefield, Bolton, and Cumbria. I always, when we do the Northern Spin, I always try and look across the north and not just Greater Manchester. So nothing new here. People say to me, Starmer's a weak leader, and I say actually the perception might be that he's a weak leader, but behind the scenes he's actually quite an iron-fisted leader as well, and he makes these decisions.
Who else we got on manoeuvres then?
Well, I mentioned Suella Braverman, Rishi Sunak, Chris Clarkson in part one. For different reasons, they could all be on manoeuvres as well. I think there's going to be a lot of manoeuvring, which is why I've included it in on manoeuvres around the King's Speech, which is on Tuesday. We're recording this on Monday as well. There's been a lot of stuff over the weekend in the Sunday media as to what we can expect. This is going to be the last throw of the die before the general election, we think. Somebody said that if there's a lot of announcements, that would suggest that Rishi Sunak's thinking about a whole year before he calls an election. And if there's not, he's probably looking at the middle of next year. I think we're going to see something about the Renters Reform Bill. I also think we're going to see something that's going to play to the justice, so don't be surprised to see judges forcing prisoners to attend their sentencing hearing. There's been a lot of talk about High Speed 2. Obviously, Sunak kicked it into the long grass. Well, he kicked it beyond that, actually, when he did his conference in Manchester.
He cancelled it, didn't he?
Yeah, he basically cancelled it. Andy Burnham is among those calling for High Speed 2 to be brought back to ensure that the Piccadilly Airport link gets built along with the Northern Powerhouse Rail. But the thought is that there's not even going to be a transport bill within the King's Speech. What do you think?
Yeah, I think even if HS2 goes, and clearly it will be doing, there's still a need for a city like Manchester to upgrade its transport. The whole Whitworth Street corridor, for example, between Castlefield and Piccadilly Station is, freight trains going along that. It's very tight and crowded. It's keeping the debate. I think Andy Burnham's keeping the debate alive about the potential for Piccadilly Station. I think that's a big project. And he's probably cracking his knuckles for a future scrap with a fiscally tight Labour government.
Yeah, no.
I'm glad you mentioned Andy Burnham because a video of him on our new TikTok channel has had over 4,000 views.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are the comments like? I bet they're not so polite, are they?
Yeah. Well, they're the thing is, we're both trying to understand TikTok. We're not the TikTok generation as well, but there's a lot of people really energized about politics, younger people. And Andy Burnham, love him or hate him, he does generate opinions.
Not many people hate him, do they really?
No, not many people. Certainly not in the north. Maybe down maybe down at Millbank, maybe.
Anyway, let's go for a quick break. I've always believed that a vibrant media sits at the heart of any community, and the business community is no different. So if you're in business, then thebusinessdesk.com is for you. We're up with the lark every morning to bring you the day's business news. We have regular events, credible news, and lots and lots of other events to bring people in the business community together. So log on now, thebusinessdesk.com, for all your regional news. Welcome back to part 3 of Northern Spin. This is the bit we like to call the fun bit. And the subcurrent running through it is that Chris from Kent has lived in the north a long time. This is the Northern Spin podcast. I'm northern born and bred and raised. And we're trying to get you to be a bit more culturally northern.
Absolutely, yeah. And I went to a place on Saturday, Barley in East Lancashire near Burnley.
Pendle Witch?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And you know what really stood out for me? We went for a walk and we went to a cafe and we got a pot of tea, a hot chocolate and a flapjack, £5.50. And when I went to Costa on the M6, 10 quid for two. That's what I love about the north.
Fantastic.
Now, we're going to talk about...
Yeah, we did. So I went to see, and it turned out you did as well.
Not together.
Killers of the Flower Moon. So I went to the Regent Cinema in Marple, which is a one-screen, very old, always has an intermission, and yet this film has an intermission all of its own. You'll have had one even at the UCI multiplex in Bolton or wherever you went.
Did you go 3.5 hours without going to the toilet?
No.
Because it was a long time.
It was a long old film. So I really enjoyed Killers of the Flower Moon. I thought the performances by Robert De Niro, Leonardo DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone were incredible. It was long, but it was so rich, so atmospheric, multi-layered, and it really does justice to an epic true crime story without ever, I feel, being overly sentimental. all the performances from the three leads in it were breathtakingly good. But I will single out one of my favourite actors, Robert De Niro, for an incredible performance.
Yeah, and very much
well known as well for promoting crumpets for Warburtons.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's 80 now. In fact, he had his 7th child earlier this year as well. Very much a Martin Scorsese film of that genre. No, I really liked it actually, and it's a sort of film that only works in the cinema. What I did notice, and was it packed? No, because
it was busy.
Yeah,
but not packed.
Because
not like James Bond or, in fact, what I call peak Regent cinema for us in where we live is things like the Great Marigold Hotel. Yeah. Anything starring Bill Nighy or Judi Dench does really well at the Regent in Marple.
Yeah, no, it was a great film.
A brave choice from Edwin, the cinema manager.
Yeah, and I thought it was but when I left the audience, when I left the auditorium, I looked at the audience. Older audience, but I can well recommend it. I watched, we mentioned the BBC last week in our podcast, and I decided to watch Time, which is a three-parter with Jodie Whittaker, who's the former Doctor Who, fantastic. It's the second actually series, because the first one is about the men's prisons. This is about the women's systems.
That's the one with Stephen Graham and Sean Bean in a men's prison.
That was superb. But I watched this one.
Wow, is it good?
And yeah, excellent, really good. I mean, don't get me wrong. People get brought to court within about 5 minutes. So, and also, would somebody have been taken to prison for fiddling the lecky? I'm not sure. But it was just really, really powerful, really, really thought-provoking. Been a thought-provoking week, as I mentioned earlier. I went to that climate change play, which I thought was fantastic. But talking about thought-provoking, you went to the home of, the home of football. You went to Manchester United at the weekend.
I did. I had the job of entertaining my 2 teenage nephews in Manchester on Saturday. They hadn't been to the city centre before, so they rode the tram down to Old Trafford to Man United for a stadium tour, which was quite good actually. Yeah. I genuinely quite enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoy being in their company more than anything. We did the dugouts, the tunnel, the press gallery, and here's the one. We also saw a mural outside the stadium, just off Warwick Road, of Mary Earps on the side of a house, like kind of Belfast style, big mural with "Welcome to Manchester" with Mary Earps on it. She also had her goalie's jersey up in the dressing room as well, because the City United derby women's game is going to be at Old Trafford, isn't it?
It's certainly coming up as well. Here's a question for you. A lot of people who've never been to Old Trafford before, the first time they go, they're amazed by it. I think it's absolutely amazing and atmospheric. And, I remember the first time I went to it and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. If you go a lot, you realise, actually, this is so far away from, like, Tottenham Stadium. It's falling apart.
Yeah. Obviously, we didn't go to a game. We just went for a tour.
But was that what was their impression?
They didn't think they'd been to the stadium tour at Liverpool during their half term in the week, and they thought Liverpool Stadium was much tidier and slicker. Yeah. But that the Liverpool Stadium, the tour that they took them on in the museum wasn't as good as United's. No, you're right. I think it's falling down. They need a new stadium if they're going to be a world-class club. Last year I've been to Porto, to the stadium experience there. Their tour was A, better, and B, the museum was better as well.
Let me football tour you. I went to Burnley, and one of the great things about
thoughts and prayers, commiserations.
One of the great things about Burnley, it was actually on the morning of a game, right. And we went into the changing room, and Tom Heaton was the Burnley goalkeeper at the time, and you could see on his area where he sits the previous penalties that the opposition had taken, and you could see where the ball had gone in. Real fascinating insight. It's big business. Football tours.
It is. Yeah. I'll tell you what else I've been doing in the last week. I went to the Talk Women in Tech Awards at Inside Hotel in Manchester. That was interesting. What will be even more interesting is whether they continue with it next year, because the host was Trista Harrison, the chief executive. I don't know if she's going to be around at Talk next year. She's indicated she's stepping down, and it'd be a great shame if they did get rid of the event. But they've also cut back a lot of staff as well.
You're one of the judges. I noticed actually Helen McHugh. Yes. Helen McHugh is she's leaving Talk as well. What sort of numbers did they get at that?
Well, it's a standing room only thing. It's not like a sitting down and having tables and all that sort of thing. So there's a couple of hundred people. I also do my lunch of the month. So I guess it was the end of the month last week with the end of October. And my lunch of the month on my Instagram feature was, drum roll,
It's like a Swedish taste to this.
Yeah, meatballs, chips and gravy at IKEA with a dime bar cheesecake afterwards. So not that northern. Early front runners for the lunch of the month for November are Popeye's Chicken in Piccadilly Gardens. Incredible. Me and Matt went there for tea on Saturday. And my perennial favourite, Antalya in Hyde. And of course, Cabana in the Northern Quarter, Rice and 3.
I don't know, see how you're so slim.
Because I work out, Chris. Okay. Right, so that's it. Anything else? Anything cultural? What's on your agenda next week?
No, I think I'm out and about across the north. I've got a few things on, but hoping the weather improves. It's I think this time of year. I don't know about you. Are you getting all Christmassy?
No.
Okay.
Not yet. No.
You don't get Christmassy till the 23rd of December.
Yes, something like that. Yeah. Anyway, that's all for episode 9 of season 5 of Northern Spin. We'll be interviewing Lou Cordwell, the chair of the business board, next week, and also someone who works very closely with Bruntwood SciTech, and she had her own business, Magnetic North, who did some amazing digital things. If you want to sponsor the podcast, please get in touch. We're on Apple Podcasts. Please review us. Don't forget to press the subscribe button. Follow us on Twitter at Northern_Spin1, or watch us on YouTube, or kids, follow us on TikTok at the.northern.spin. Thank you to Watt Media for recording this podcast. Our sponsors, FI Real Estate Management and Assets Capital. Special mention to Elliot Taylor for his lovely piece of music, New Beginnings. My name is Michael Taylor.
My name, as always, is Chris Maguire, bringing you good news.